We live right next to a civilization 3 million times older than humanity. Our civilization is a mere 100,000 years old, theirs has thrived for 100 million years. We interact with them constantly. We are chased by them, attacked by them, and we depend on them. Yet, this civilization seems completely unaware of our existence. We aren't talking about bacteria. This creature has built its own society, complete with a clear professional hierarchy and career ladders. They educate their young, care for their offspring, and make collective decisions. They have outlasted every species that has dominated the Earth over the last 100 million years. It sounds like science fiction, but it's not. We are talking about bees. Even a child knows what a beehive looks like, nearly perfect hexagonal holes lined up neatly, as if produced by a 3D printer. But if you stop for a moment and think, it's mind-blowing that tiny insects can create such flawless architecture. In Texas, USA, in 1999, a homeowner hired a beekeeper to deal with a honeybee nest. 6 months later, the bees returned and stayed for 15 years. By 2014, when beekeepers were called back, the hive had grown to 6 meters tall and was estimated to contain between 200,000 and 500,000 bees. 6 meters might not sound like much, but remember that a worker honeybee is usually only 1.25 centimeters long. If you scaled them up to human size, that Texas hive would be 816 meters tall. Give those bees a few more years, and they would have built the tallest biological structure ever created on Earth, surpassing the Burj Khalifa in Dubai in terms of scale. There are over 20,000 species of bees on Earth, more than all bird and mammal species combined, which total only about 17,400. Honeybees live on every continent except Antarctica. It is estimated that there are about 350 million honeybee colonies in the world. Nearly a third of those are managed by humans for honey. A colony's population ranges from 10,000 to 60,000 bees. Do the math, and you get between 3.5 trillion and 21 trillion honeybees worldwide. That's a ratio of 1 human to somewhere between 426 and 2,556 bees. Personally, I'd surrender and leave that fight to my siblings. But wait a second, those are just honeybees. Out of more than 20,000 known bee species, only a tiny fraction are actually honeybees. Can you guess how many? You'd be wrong. There are only 8 species. Only 8 out of over 20,000, roughly 0.04% of the world's bee species, are honeybees. And only 2 of those, Apis mellifera, the European honeybee, and Apis cerana, the eastern honeybee, have been domesticated by humans. If we assume the population of each of the remaining 99.96% of bee species is around 1 trillion, the world is harboring at least 20 quadrillion bees. That's 2.5 million bees for every single human. A worker bee weighs about 0.1 grams. 20 quadrillion bees, each weighing an average of 0.1 grams, equals a staggering 2 billion tons. Meanwhile, the entire human population of 8.2 billion people weighs only about 500 million tons. Unless you can support 4 times your body weight, the bee family could literally crush humanity under their collective weight. That's a terrifying thought. A single honeybee can pollinate 5,000 flowers a day. A honeybee colony can pollinate 300 million flowers in a single day, and we have 350 million colonies globally. But again, only 8 out of more than 20,000 species make honey. Proportionally speaking, the honeybees we encounter daily are the minority, the outliers, even the weirdos, of the bee world. It's as if there were a race of humans who lived solely by breathing air from the sky. Honeybees don't make honey for Winnie the Pooh or for you and me to eat. They make it for themselves. We and Pooh are just freeloaders, scavengers, or thieves, or all of the above. Furthermore, bees don't make honey from saliva or pollen. While bees do pollinate flowers, they don't turn that pollen into honey. Pollen is a vital source of protein, both worker bees and larvae eat it. As a bee flies through the air, static electricity gives its body a positive charge. When it lands on a flower, the pollen sticks to its body. The bee uses stiff hairs to brush the pollen into pollen baskets on its hind legs. As the bee moves from flower to flower, pollen falls off, fertilizing the plants. Thus, pollination is just a side effect of the bee's foraging. They don't do it on purpose. An insect's brain is only simple enough to focus on the survival of its species rather than helping plants grow. So, what about the honey? This liquid, which costs a fortune per liter, is made from nectar, not pollen. Honeybees create honey by collecting nectar from flowers, breaking it down into simple sugars, and storing it in hexagonal cells. First, the bee sucks nectar into its honey stomach, where enzymes break down sucrose into glucose and fructose. Other enzymes break down glucose into gluconic acid and hydrogen peroxide. Gluconic acid increases the nectar's acidity, preventing bacteria from growing. And hydrogen peroxide, which you might recognize as a common antiseptic, acts as a disinfectant. Because honey is acidic and contains antibacterial agents, it rarely spoils. In fact, archaeologists have found honey thousands of years old in ancient Egyptian tombs, and it was still edible. When a bee's honey stomach is full, it returns to the hive and regurgitates the nectar into the mouth of another worker bee. This process repeats, with each bee adding more enzymes. Finally, the bees deposit the nectar into the honeycomb cells and fan it with their wings to evaporate the water and concentrate the nectar. Honey contains a lot of sugar and very little water, about 80% sugar and 18% water. If an unlucky bacterium falls into honey, osmotic pressure draws the water out of its cells, killing it. Once the nectar has dried and the cell is full, the bees seal it with beeswax for preservation. Essentially, honey is refined nectar, loaded with preservatives and dried out. Like nectar, fresh pollen spoils quickly if not processed. Honeybees turn fresh pollen into bee bread. They do this by mixing 7 parts fresh pollen with 3 parts nectar and saliva. The mixture is stored in cells and covered with a thin layer of honey. After a few weeks, bacteria, yeast, and enzymes in the bee saliva ferment the pollen and nectar into a superfood rich in protein, simple sugars, essential amino acids, and omega fatty acids. In fact, bee bread is also known as ambrosia, meaning the food of the gods. For honeybees, pollen is the rice and noodles of summer, while bee bread and honey are the emergency rations for winter, and high-quality rations at that. The question is, why do only 8 out of over 20,000 species make honey? Or more accurately, why do these 8 species need to make honey? Reality proves that not making honey is actually the optimal survival strategy, as 99.96% of bee species exist today without it. It turns out that, except for a few honeybee species, most bees are solitary or semi-social. Their populations are low, and they simply don't need that much food. Honeybee colonies have too many mouths to feed, so they must ensure food security to survive the winter. Bees are overthinkers, they usually produce 2 to 3 times the amount of honey they need to survive. As long as there is nectar, honeybees will make honey forever. This makes Pooh and Homo sapiens feel a bit less guilty whenever we take their honey. That said, thanks to human breeding and beekeeping, honeybees are more prosperous today than ever. Humans are certainly not the honeybee's #1 enemy. That title likely goes to the wasp. Despite the name, a wasp is definitely not a bee. Wasps and ants are the bee's closest relatives, closer than we are to chimpanzees. You might never have eaten honey, but it's no exaggeration to say that without bees, our lives would be very different. Appearing in the early Cretaceous period over 100 million years ago, bees and ants became the most successful social insects in evolutionary history. They occupy various terrestrial ecosystems, have outlived the dinosaurs and every other dominant species, and continue to have a massive impact on the global environment today. Don't believe it? Nearly 90% of wild plants and 75% of the world's crops depend on pollinators, including bees, flies, beetles, butterflies, birds, and bats. Among them, bees are the VIPs, the super VIPs, the extremely mega ultimate VIPs. They currently pollinate nearly 1/6 of the world's flowering plant species, including over 110 types of crops, producing 1/3 of the food we put in our mouths every day. This includes meat from animals that eat bee-pollinated grasses. They also pollinate plants used for drinks, medicine, and cotton fibers. Some articles or videos might claim that if all bees disappeared, humans wouldn't survive more than 4 years. In reality, it's not quite that dire. While many fruits and vegetables are pollinated by bees and insects, and our choices would be severely limited without them, the truth is that a large portion of human calories comes from grains. Most vital grains, including rice, wheat, oats, corn, peas, and beans, are either self-pollinating or wind-pollinated, meaning they don't need insects. If bees vanished, the human menu would lose significant diversity, and many would lose their favorite foods, but it likely wouldn't cause human extinction or mass starvation. Bees are an insect lineage with a massive size range. The smallest is Perdita minima, less than 2 mm long, small enough to sit on the head of a worker bee. On the other end, the largest is Wallace's giant bee, as big as an adult's thumb with a wingspan of up to 6.4 centimeters. If they were human-sized, Perdita minima would be smaller than a newborn baby, while Wallace's giant bee would be a 9-meter-tall giant. A single honeybee produces only about 0.8 grams of honey in its entire life. To produce 1 liter of honey, 1,250 bees must fly a total distance of nearly 200,000 kilometers, visit 4 to 8 million flowers, and collect 4 liters of nectar. Honey is produced inside hives, which act like factories. The workers in these factories are the worker bees. Like worker ants, worker bees make up about 98 to 99% of a colony's population. They are the primary living units and the driving force of the honey factory. Worker bees are females that are not sexually developed and cannot reproduce. They handle almost all the work in a hive: foraging, building the nest, caring for the queen and larvae, cleaning, air conditioning, storing honey and pollen, defending the hive, and removing dead bees. It's exhausting. Every worker bee is the most dedicated babysitter on the planet, working without complaint, without days off, without personal time, and without retirement. Does anyone want to sign up for that job description? Despite their long list of duties, a worker bee's lifespan is quite short. In the summer, they live only 15 to 38 days. They work themselves to death, and even in death, they serve the collective. In the summer, when a bee senses death is near, it usually flies away from the hive to die so its sisters won't have to clean up its body. But in the winter, many die inside. When it warms up, the survivors drag the dead out. In the autumn, the queen lays a special type of worker bee called winter bees. Winter bees are heavier, have larger abdomens, and live for 4 to 6 months. Their mission is to keep the colony alive until spring. The largest member of a hive, in both size and status, is the queen. It's similar to ants, as they are close relatives. The queen is the only female in the colony that can lay eggs. She determines the prosperity of the hive. A healthy queen can lay up to 2,000 eggs a day and up to 1 million eggs over her lifetime, which averages 2 to 3 years but can reach 5. While an ant colony can have hundreds of queens, a bee colony has only one. The remaining members of a hive are the drones. Drones are larger than workers but smaller than the queen. Each hive has a few hundred to 1,000 drones, making up 1 to 2% of the population. Interestingly, a queen only mates once, with 10 to 20 drones, and this only happens in the first week or two of her adulthood. It's not that the queen is promiscuous, she needs to mate with multiple males to ensure genetic diversity. After her mating week, the queen stores 2 to 7 million healthy sperm to use for the rest of her life. Sadly, the vast majority of drones will never get the chance to touch the queen. But from a certain perspective, not mating might be a blessing. Aside from the cinematic mating scene at altitudes of 10 to 40 meters while both are flying at full speed, the drone's fate after the act is grim. During mating, a drone mounts the queen and pumps all his plasma into a shot that is so powerful it makes an audible sound. This literally ruptures the drone's reproductive organs, tearing his abdomen apart and killing him instantly. Subsequent drones will approach the queen, remove the organs of their predecessor still attached to her, only to repeat that same tragic fate. And if by some miracle a drone survives mating, he is kicked out of the hive because his mission is complete. A drone's sole purpose is to mate. They don't work, they don't forage, they don't make honey, and they can't even sting to defend the hive. Yet they consume honey, spending their lives as useless resource drains. They don't just eat, they feast. A drone can eat as much as 3 worker bees while doing absolutely nothing for the community. They are the definition of freeloaders. The question is, if the queen only needs 10 to 20 drones, why keep hundreds or thousands? As mentioned before, worker bees are overthinkers. During good economic times, they keep these drones around for decoration and to ensure that any new queen will always have a supply of mates. However, during lean years or in winter when food is scarce, the workers will kick the drones out, leaving them to starve or freeze to death. It sounds harsh, and life for a drone is indeed full of hardship. They have grandfathers but no fathers. Drones hatch from unfertilized eggs, meaning they only inherit one set of chromosomes from their mother, the queen. This means they have no father and no paternal grandfather. However, the egg that hatched the queen was fertilized, so the queen has a father, who is also the drone's maternal grandfather. If you're following the math, it sounds like the queen is mating with her own relatives. To avoid this, during mating season, drones fly to drone congregation areas. Drones from neighboring colonies gather there, hoping for the queen's favor. Interestingly, drones usually don't fly as far as the queen, which helps her avoid mating with males from her own hive. While the queen appears to be the leader, the real power lies with the largest force in the colony, the worker bees. In fact, any fertilized egg can hatch into a queen. But which egg is chosen and which larva is raised to be the new queen depends entirely on the collective will of the thousands of workers. The queen doesn't get to choose her successor like an ancient monarch. When the queen's egg-laying productivity slows due to injury or age, the colony senses her pheromones decreasing and prepares to raise a new queen. They select 10 to 20 newly hatched female larvae and feed them royal jelly. To clarify, the queen lays two types of eggs. While unfertilized eggs become drones, both workers and queens hatch from fertilized eggs. The only difference is their diet. Worker larvae are fed mostly bee bread and honey, while queen larvae are fed exclusively royal jelly. Royal jelly is secreted from the hypopharyngeal glands of worker bees and is extremely rich in protein. It allows the larva's ovaries to develop fully, enabling them to become queens. Without royal jelly, a worker bee will never become a queen. Queen larvae are larger and are raised in special, queen cells. When the larva is ready to pupate, the workers seal the cells. The first queen to mature crawls out and kills all the surrounding larvae. Her sisters will compete for the crown mercilessly. If two queens emerge at the same time, they duel, and the winner becomes the sole queen. This ensures the new queen is the strongest and fastest. Even her mother, if unlucky, could die at the hands, or rather, the stinger, of her own daughter. A queen's stinger is smooth, while a worker's is barbed. This means a queen can sting multiple times without dying, whereas a worker can only sting once. In another scenario, the workers might kill the old queen. If she's lucky, the old queen is allowed to lead part of the colony away to start a new hive, leaving the crown to her daughter. Or, if the new queen isn't mature enough to lay eggs, the mother queen might be allowed to live a bit longer until her daughter starts laying. But eventually, the retired queen is killed or expelled. Despite being the most important and protected member of the colony for her entire life, the queen often dies a tragic and unjust death, with no funeral or mourning. The Game of Thrones, in any species, is truly ruthless. Equally ruthless is the bee's security force. A strong colony usually has 10 to 20 guard bees patrolling the entrance. Bees have an olfactory system to recognize friend or foe. The scent of the bees is their passport, and every colony has its own unique smell. Any suspicious individual is thoroughly sniffed by the ancient antennae on their heads. The border patrol also handles quarantine. Sick bees may not be allowed in. These security officers are incredibly disciplined and cold. If an uninvited guest, usually a honey thief from another colony, doesn't leave, its wings, antennae, and other body parts are torn off. The disabled invader is then thrown to the ground to die. That is the fate of most strange bees. However, there are two exceptions. The first is bribery. When a worker bee forages too far from its hive and lacks the strength to return, it can apply for citizenship at another hive. If it brings a stomach full of honey and a basket full of pollen, it might be allowed to join. The second exception is drones. Drones from a strange hive are usually accepted without condition. The only thing they contribute, besides being backups for a new queen, is hive ventilation. Hives are crowded and need constant airflow. Luckily, drones have wings. To be fair, even if a drone wanted to collect pollen and nectar, he couldn't. Unlike workers, drones lack pollen baskets and long tongues. Their bodies are simply not built for labor, they are optimized for a single shot in their lifetime. Even their heavy eating isn't just laziness, it's to fulfill their unique mission. Producing sperm is hard work, and each drone needs to produce 5 to 10 million soldiers for the queen. Even hovering in the air all summer isn't laziness, mating happens at high altitudes and high speeds. Drones are essentially hitting the gym every day to increase their stamina and flight skills for their one chance at mating. Worker bees have another powerful weapon, the stinger. A bee's stinger is about 2 millimeters long. If a bee were human-sized, its stinger would be 27 centimeters long. A worker bee's stinger is barbed, causing it to get stuck in the skin of most victims. After piercing the skin, the bee instinctively tries to fly away. When it does, the stinger, along with the venom sac and a portion of its intestines, is ripped out of the bee's abdomen. Even after being disconnected from the body, the venom sac continues to contract, pumping venom into the enemy. It's a horrific sight if you imagine it on a human scale. Because each sting usually costs the bee its life, guards reserve this ultimate weapon for the greatest threats. When a bee stings someone, it releases a complex pheromone called isoamyl acetate, which smells like ripe bananas. This scent acts as a call to arms, triggering an attack from the entire colony. In other words, the worker marks the target with its own life. Once the signal is sent, all worker bees temporarily become kamikaze warriors to protect their hive. They position themselves around the entrance, raising their abdomens and stingers into a combat stance while releasing more alarm pheromones. Very quickly, the fighting force grows exponentially. For someone who isn't allergic, a bee sting is painful but mostly harmless. An average adult can withstand over 1,000 bee stings, while children can die from 500. However, for those with a bee venom allergy, a single sting can cause anaphylactic shock, which can be fatal. This allergy isn't rare, affecting 0.3% to 7% of the population depending on the region. But in reality, bees are gentler than you think. If you don't bother them, they won't bother you. And drones can't even hurt you if they wanted to, as they have no venom or even a stinger. We've praised the perfect beauty of the beehive, but do you know how they build it? And why did they choose the hexagon out of all the shapes in the universe? Beehives are made of beeswax. A bee's wax glands are located on 4 segments of its abdomen. Wax is secreted as a liquid and hardens into soft, triangular flakes when exposed to air. The bee then picks up these flakes with its leg hairs, brings them to its mouth, and chews them into soft wax pellets. To keep the wax pliable, the bees maintain a hive temperature of 32 to 35 degrees Celsius. Scientists have found that the hexagon is the most efficient shape for building a structure of many identical cells packed together. A hexagonal hive uses the least amount of material because its perimeter is smaller than a triangle or square of the same area, while maximizing the internal volume of each cell. If they used circles, there would be many wasted gaps between cells. But this doesn't mean bees run computer simulations or complex math. In fact, bees don't actually try to build hexagons, they try to build circles, or more accurately, cylinders. The laws of physics turn them into hexagons. Specifically, as bees build small circular wax cells, the wax is still warm and flexible. As many workers build these cells side by side, surface tension, pressure from neighboring cells, and gravity cause the circular cells to deform. The contact points flatten out, naturally creating a hexagonal shape. Of course, not everything is left to nature. Worker bees have sophisticated techniques for building cells with high precision. They build cells with a slight upward tilt of about 13 degrees. This angle prevents honey and pollen from flowing out, even if the hive shakes or moves. Bees use their bodies, including their heads, jaws, and legs, as measuring tools to adjust the thickness of the hive walls and ensure uniformity. They even use their heads as a natural plumb line to maintain the direction, depth, and verticality of the stacked layers. As a result, the beehive is not only durable and space-saving but also highly aesthetic. If a bee discovers a fragrant flower garden, how does it signal its sisters? How does it describe the direction and distance? The answer is dancing. The Google Maps of the bee world is called the waggle dance. A worker bee moves in a figure-8 pattern with a waggle in the middle. This waggle conveys vital information. The angle of the waggle relative to the vertical line in the hive determines the angle between the sun and the food source. If the waggle is straight up, the food is in the direction of the sun. If it's tilted left or right, the garden is at that corresponding angle from the sun. The duration of the waggle indicates the distance. The longer the waggle, the further the flight. On average, 1 second of waggling corresponds to about 1 kilometer. Bees have excellent vision, and drones have the best of all. A bee has 5 eyes, 2 large compound eyes on the sides and 3 smaller eyes on top of its head. Each compound eye of a queen contains 3,000 to 4,000 facets, while a worker has about 7,000, and a drone has 8,000 to 11,000 facets on each side. The 3 small eyes on top, called ocelli, detect light intensity, track light polarization, and detect UV rays, helping the bee navigate, maintain stability during flight, and spot predators from above. Some flowers have patterns that glow under UV light, guiding bees to the nectar. Polarized light patterns in the sky, created by the atmosphere, allow bees to indirectly determine the sun's position even on cloudy days. It's similar to how GPS uses satellites. While they have advanced vision, bees cannot see the color red, they can't distinguish it from black. What you should envy, however, is their sense of smell. Bees don't have noses, they smell through 2 antennae filled with scent receptors. Their sense of smell is comparable to a dog's. They can detect certain scents in concentrations of just a few parts per trillion. A honeybee can smell nectar from over 1.5 kilometers away. That's like detecting one unwashed sock in a pile of 2 million clean ones. Bees fly relatively slowly. A worker's top speed is about 32 kilometers per hour when searching for flowers and about 20 kilometers per hour when loaded with honey and pollen. If you accidentally anger a swarm, you can theoretically outrun them. Most bees forage within 1 kilometer, but they can fly up to 10 kilometers if food is scarce. A colony of 60,000 bees can fly a total distance equivalent to the trip from Earth to the Moon every day. A bee flaps its wings 200 to 250 times per second, 4 to 8 times faster than the human eye can perceive. Bees aren't as strong as their ant relatives. While an ant can lift 10 to 50 times its weight, a bee can only carry about 50% of its body weight while flying. To put that in perspective, it would take about 1.4 million honeybees to carry a 70 kilograms adult through the air. We've talked a lot about queens, workers, and drones. But there is another entity in the bee kingdom that many scientists believe possesses high intelligence and even signs of a mind, the hive itself. Observing how thousands of bees engage in coherent, rational, and sometimes seemingly conscious behaviors, scientists suggest the existence of hive intelligence or swarm intelligence. This collective organism never hibernates, they huddle into a ball to keep each other warm, eating the honey and pollen they stored during the summer. Many colonies don't survive the winter, but even so, the bee kingdom recovers strongly in the summer. Each colony is a kingdom with its own characteristics and even personalities. There are strong colonies and weak ones, gentle ones and aggressive ones. Each hive operates as a completely separate entity capable of planning and making decisions, like replacing the queen. In fact, the queen is just a pawn under the command of this collective consciousness. The 100-million-year-old bee civilization even shows undeniable signs of democracy. When a colony splits to form a new one, scout bees are sent to find a new home. While they search, the swarm rests temporarily on a branch. When a scout finds a suitable spot, it returns and performs a waggle dance. Other bees then visit the site to inspect it. If they agree, they return and dance in the same direction. They compare sites until a consensus is reached. Once they agree, the swarm takes off for its new home. If that isn't true democracy, what is? While swarming is understood, other collective decisions remain baffling. For example, in 2006, researchers first observed colony collapse disorder, where the majority of worker bees suddenly disappeared, leaving behind the queen and a few young bees despite having plenty of food. No one knows the reason behind it. Although we claim to have domesticated honeybees, it's clear this creature still hides many secrets from us. Ultimately, they may not view us as masters like dogs or cats do. They might not even see us as a significant living entity. Remember, we have only existed for a few 100,000 years and have been civilized for a few thousand. They have existed for over 100 million years. To them, we might just be a strange and fleeting phenomenon of nature, one that has just begun and will soon end, much like the dinosaurs that once loudly ruled the earth.